All right, we're going to go ahead and get started with the presentation portion of the event. Thank you everyone for joining us for Seismic's event, Network for Your Net Worth. A little bit about the event. We're going to get started by discussing the importance of networking, and especially what networking is and what it isn't, some of the common misconceptions around networking. Go into some different strategies for putting networking into action so you can find one that you're maybe most comfortable with. We'll have a little bit of a discussion about networking etiquette and best practices. That should take about half an hour, and then we're going to close with the second half hour being time to practice networking in breakout rooms while you're being hosted by networking mentors who will guide you through the process. So first, I'd like to talk about the importance of networking. I think the important thing we start with here is defining networking. So what is networking actually? It's important to note networking is not just about collecting connections. You might think of networking as a bit of a dated term, building up your Rolodex of people that you can reach out to, but it's a lot more than that now. And networking does take time. When you're looking to actually build those connections, rarely does a connection pay off the way you expect it to right away. If you're getting into networking to find an open job, it's not likely that you'll find one your first attempt, but that does happen, but it just takes time and it takes really fostering those connections that you're making. And it's a two-way relationship. You don't want to go into networking just thinking about what you can get out of your connections. It's a lot about also figuring out what knowledge you already possess and what you can do to help others as well. And sometimes those connections that you've helped them a little, they've helped you a little, are the ones that are going to pay off in the ways that you really want them to in the long run. We'll talk about the two core whys for networking. And I have these side by side because I would say they're of equal importance. The one people probably most think of for networking is for opportunities. These can be job opportunities, but they can also be research collaborations as well. You think of the ones that are going to be out in the open, the ones that are easily searchable, and then the ones that you really only get or hear about from the connections that you've built up. But I also like to point out the knowledge that comes with networking. This can be everything from having someone that you can reach out to if you're having trouble with a particular assay or a particular part of your research project, being able to reach out to someone who's an expert who's done it before and get their feedback, which makes your process go quicker. But it's also, when you think about it, tied into opportunities, particularly job opportunities. It's a great way to learn more about the specific roles in the industry, what they do, especially if you're moving from one sector to another, or you're just entering a field for the first time, or you're looking to switch careers. It's a great way to learn about the field from people who are actually working in it or adjacent to it. I want to go a little bit more in depth in opportunities. The first thing you probably hear people mention all the time at networking events is the idea of access to hidden roles. Hidden roles are usually phrased as kind of like that under the ocean part of the iceberg. The ones that are not publicly advertised, the ones that companies are looking to fill through referrals in their networks, being on that list of potentials that they're looking for without the role being public. And that's certainly one aspect, but the other aspect I want to focus on as well is you find out about what roles are a good fit for you. You may be talking to people who have been in the industry, who have been in roles similar to the ones that you are interested in, have been a manager or have hired for the roles that you're interested in. And getting to know you and your interests and your skills, they can even recommend potentially roles for you that you would not have been considering before, but that they can see is a perfect fit for your interests and your skills. So that way you can also, even without a direct connection to here's an open role, would you like to fill it? You can expand the roles that you are looking at, and you can get that kind of assurance of how you fit that role. And then also recommendations and introductions to indirect connections. It's not all the time that when you find an opportunity through your network, that it's with a direct connection, that it's with someone who's with the company or university or what have you, who's actually hiring. Sometimes, I'd say maybe even close to half of the time, it's someone who's not a direct connection. It's someone who knows someone who's looking for someone. A lot of the time when companies are reaching out to their networks, they're not just telling their employees, hey, reach out to everyone you know and see if anyone's interested. They're also, from those points, say, oh, and continue to tell them they can share with their networks if anyone's interested. So sometimes it's those second and third degree, the third and fourth degree connections that actually pay off. But the other side of the opportunity is talking about that two-way street. It's a great option to help others with their career goals. No matter where you are, if you're a graduate student, there are undergraduates who want your advice and expertise. If you're a postdoc, there are graduate students who want to hear from you about how you found your postdoc. If you're working in a sector that's not biotech right now, or not industry, you have skills and expertise of that sector that you can share. And so even though you might not think, oh, I'm an expert, I'm here to learn about this particular field or this particular company, you are an expert in other ways. And being able to share that can also go a long way in making these connections. And for knowledge, I've already talked about this a little bit, but it's a great way to learn about fields that are new to you. When you go into interviews, or even when you're doing informational interviews or networking on top of networking events, the more that you're able to understand and pick up about an industry you're interested in, it's going to be really important in standing out, especially if you lack direct experience. If you can go into an interview, you can talk to someone and say, oh, I haven't actually done preclinical studies to support an IND, but I understand the role of those in the drug development process, the drug development pipeline. That can go a long way to helping you get your foot in the door. You can also discover a lot more about how your skills transfer. I think we all have in our heads the idea of what we're best at and what we're not so great at. But as you talk to people, you can find out sometimes that the skills that others perceive in you are not necessarily the ones that you would consider your biggest strengths. So having that external insight on your skills and what about your past experience is interesting to them can be really helpful. And again, figuring out, how do I pitch myself? And explore how to stand out. How candidates are evaluated vary sector to sector. This includes how you go about pitching your experience, how much detail you provide, what skills you want to focus on. And figuring out from networking and from feedback from networking events, what about you stands out to these professionals can help you not only tailor your resume, prepare for interviews, but can help you make more connections earlier on when you're networking. So I want to go through a few networking strategies, because I know that the idea of traditional networking, which we'll get to first, and that I would kind of classify this event under, is not something that everyone takes to really readily. So traditional networking strategies, I'd say, are good for really comfortable networkers who want clear expectations, who want to come into an event and say, it's set for me to get this information, it's set for networking. It's not an event where networking is kind of the adjacent part, or where you might feel awkward about it's not particularly pitched as a networking event, but I do want to network. You want those clear expectations and you want to have clear stated goals. Group networking events, I would also classify informational interviews under here. They are, essentially kind of networking events, even though you reach out and you set them up, and they are a chance for you to specifically gain that industry knowledge and interview someone else about their company and their role. I would still classify them based on the fact that there's clear expectations. It's about sharing and giving information. I would classify it under traditional networking strategies. My tips for doing well with traditional networking are plan, interact, and remain comfortable. If you're going to a networking event, you can't necessarily look up everyone who's going to be at the event, but research the event. are there stated goals of the event? Are there a particular sector? Is it mostly medical device people? Is it mostly biotech startups? Or is it mostly academic with a few industry professionals there? Knowing a little bit about the event and who will be attending before going. And of course, if you're doing something more one-on-one, like an informational interview or a follow-up with someone from a larger networking event, research who you're going to be meeting with. And actively listen. Don't just share. It's not necessarily a chance for you to go around the room and give everyone your elevator pitch. You want to also interact with them, listen to them, ask them questions, and then react to their answers as well. People will remember it a lot more positively, and they'll be able to remember you when you reach out to them if they've had a little bit more of a interaction with you than just a hello, here's who I am. But I know that traditional networking, it's something that I've struggled with in the past. It's something that can be tiring for some people. And I would say it is really important to mix in some of these traditional networking events with your networking strategy, but in a way where you can remain comfortable. So if you're more comfortable joining group discussions and approaching someone one-on-one, do that. And it's okay to take breaks or leave. You don't need to stay at the event for the whole time it's scheduled. It's completely okay if it's starting to feel like a chore or you're starting to get tired to say, I could only stay for an hour. It was wonderful to meet you. I'd like to follow back up if you have time in the next week, and leave. And something in marketing that they talk about is inbound marketing. It's the idea that you're not going out and you're pitching to customers, but you're drawing customers to you with something that's useful for them, usually some kind of content. And so I've renamed this strategy inbound strategies. I think it's good for networkers who want to make their skills really obvious, to be able to show off what they bring to the table, and also to be able to give back information to people who are consuming that usually content. It's a way to put your name out there through searchable means. It can be either content creation, if you write a blog for a student group, for school, for an association that you are a member of, making a portfolio website that you can share, and agreeing to participate in presentations or speaker opportunities. And again, this could be as simple as we're having some undergraduates who are touring the college and they want to talk to some graduate students about applying to graduate school. When you can manage, taking the time out to do some of those things really does help you not only build skills, but gets your name out there and shows not only your skills, but provide something useful to people who would be networking with you. For these inbound strategies, the first tip I would say is add value. It's, in a way, it is kind of advertising yourself, but it's also sharing your expertise in a way that people will notice and come back to or reach out to you about. And you all have expertise at this point. But you also want to know your audience. You want to know what information is going to be really actionable for them, what's going to stand out for them. And if you can do that in a way that also highlights the skills that they're going to be likely looking for. A good example of this, which might not apply to everyone, is programming languages. Certain programming languages stand out to you. When someone's looking to solve a problem, sometimes I'll go and look, has someone done this before? Having an archive of, here's what I've done, and here's some common problems people run into, and here's my workaround, here's how I got to a solution. Those are really helpful. They're something that an audience is likely to be searching for, and it also allows you to show off your skill with what they're looking for. And also take feedback gracefully. Every time you're putting yourself out there, there's going to be a lot of really good feedback, but you also might get some critique as well. You don't need to act on it, especially for something like this. It's something that's meant to be enjoyable and skills building for you, while also putting your name out there. But you do want to take it gracefully. The last strategy I want to mention is what we call more passive networking. And it's good for networkers who are really intimidated by the traditional networking strategies. This is a way where you can build connections, but you're also all working on something else together. Finding an opportunity to build a network around common interest, activity, or all wanting to gain a similar skill. Examples of this are courses, even professional development courses that are not college associated, volunteering, and educational events as well. I'd also put there's ones that can overlap. You can be a part of a student group, a professional association that does traditional networking events, but a lot of times they'll also do giving back events where everyone will go out and volunteer. If you're really intimidated by the networking events, maybe start attending the ones that are not clearly stated networking, but some of the same people are likely to be there, and you're going to be talking to them while you're working with them. My tips for this is it does take, I think I would say, more time from you than the traditional networking. And for some of the courses, they can be costly as well. So include some utility to yourself as well. So include the topic that's interesting to you or a skill that it's helping teach you that adds value beyond just the networking. If it's volunteering, picking a cause that's really near and dear to you. But also build these into active connections. It's nice to talk to everyone while you're studying for the same course, while you're working on the same volunteer event, but you do want to go a little bit beyond that and build them into active connections. So finding ways to interact beyond the activity, things like going out to lunch after volunteering, studying outside of the courses or suggesting some studying outside of courses, or even just reaching out after the event, finding them on LinkedIn, sending a message and saying it was wonderful talking to you. I really enjoyed our conversation about this. I'd like to have you in my network. Before we go into the breakout rooms, I want to cover some networking etiquette as well, because there's really not, I would say, one right way to do networking. As we just went over, there's different types of networking that's going to be comfortable for different people. But I think there are some hard do's and some kind of hard don'ts that I want to cover. The first one is always go in to make a good impression. The first way to do this is being a sharer, not a taker. And this goes back to the two-way street. If something's asked of you, if you're asked to make an introduction, be open to doing that within reason. As well as if there's someone who's connected to someone you are interested in talking to, politely asking if they would make an introduction. But you also keep a record of your conversations. I really suggest, not necessarily everyone, but if there's people that you do want to follow up with, keep some records of your conversation, jot down a little bit about who you met that you want to follow back up with. And before you forget, write down some information you learned about them or something they shared at the networking event. People are going to be more likely to respond and have those active connection building follow-up conversations. If when you reach out to them, you can share, I met you at this event, you shared this, I found that really insightful, I'd like to keep in touch. Something I've said before at events is, I think one of the best compliments you can pay someone is to show that you listen to them. And being able to demonstrate that is really going to go a long way in building the connections. It also helps you keep in mind as you see your LinkedIn, potentially your connections grow. Who is this person? How do I know them? What situation and what was my intention in building this connection? Even though it's not an elevator pitch time, you do want to know your top strengths and you want to be able to share them and share what you can contribute. And this goes into knowing what the audience at the networking event is going to be. What do you want them to know about you? You don't need to share your whole life story, but what are some of the top 2, top 3 things you want them to know about you, and being prepared to share that. But also remember, you aren't bothering people. I know so many people at networking events are like, well, I see this conversation going on at this table. I don't really want to join because they're in the middle of it and I don't want to bother people. Or I don't want to reach out after the event. We had a good conversation, but yeah, I don't want to bother them. You aren't bothering people. If you don't get a reply, it's probably because people are busy. I've very rarely heard of people saying, I'm reached out to all the time and it's too much. People are happy to share when they have the time for the most part. And yes, it might mean sometimes walking into a conversation, but sometimes those are the best ways to learn about the industry, is just say, can I join you? What are you talking about? If it's something interesting to you, it's okay to be a fly on the wall for a little while. Some common pitfalls I want to make sure to mention avoiding is coming off like you're prioritizing connections. You don't want to avoid talking to certain people, or excuse yourself really quickly because someone doesn't seem like they're going to be that direct connection to a job, a direct connection to a collaboration. You want to treat everyone as if they could be a useful connection, rather than ignoring those that don't seem useful to you. In fact, I said in my experience, sometimes it's not the connections that seem like the most obvious, like this person works at this company that I would like to work at, so I really want to connect with them. Sometimes it's not that connection that results in, say, the job offer or the collaboration that you want. Sometimes it's the ones that are the indirect connections that do happen to know someone, especially if there's someone who goes to a lot of networking events and likes talking to people. You never know who someone knows. And you also don't always know what information they have that could be useful down the line, or that they might want information from you down the line, what they might find interesting about your past experience that you can share with them. And I would say demanding follow-ups, though, is a pitfall. So I said, you're not annoying people to remind them, but you don't want to be demanding. Reminders are good, demands are not. It's just a truth of it that not everyone's going to follow up on what they promised. Sometimes people will say, oh, this is great. I'll introduce you to this person I know that works at this company. Since I know you're interested, it'll be great. I'll introduce you. And not everyone's going to follow up, unfortunately. That's kind of the chance you take with networking. You're going to get some hits, you're going to get some misses. You can remind people gently. You'll reach out and say, oh, I had a great time talking to you. You had mentioned potentially introducing me to your colleague at this company. I would be really excited to talk to them. But demands or not, people will appreciate reminders, especially when they're very busy. Some of the promises not being followed up on are not just they didn't mean to follow up on it, it's just they forgot. And also focusing only on job opportunities. A lot of the people that you'll meet with are not people who are in a position to directly hire you into a role. They might not have that power. The company might not be in a position to hire. Being asked for a job is uncomfortable. So I would say avoiding direct asks. You can, in things like follow-up informational interviews, mention that you're interested in the company and what they're working on. But a lot of times the job opportunities are ones that someone will follow back up with once they've gotten to know you a little.